Hello. So this is a demo for generation of a mock API using an OpenAPI 3.0 definition. I found myself many times working in different APIs, which I always want to have when it's a REST API, I always want to have my OpenAPI 3.0 definition and work off of that. That also helps with documentation, with the use of Postman. So the other piece here is that I always like to use, when possible, serverless architecture. So this generative application that I built is going to be slightly opinionated into what I think could be a great solution for dynamically generating mock APIs. In this case, I created a file for a user management API that manages users and their subscriptions. So we're going to run the application to generate all the necessary assets from infrastructure to the different handlers that the Lambdas are going to use. It's important to say that this is going to be deployed on AWS, so we're going to use API Gateway and we're going to use AWS Lambda to run these mock endpoints. But it's all going to be self-contained within the application, including the documentation pieces. So for running this, I'm gonna remove, this is something, I'm gonna remove the files that I have on deploy. Yes. Let's see that there's nothing on deploy because this is where it's gonna generate the assets. So now we're gonna run the application that we have the project clean using the input OpenAPI file on that path. Now this is processing the file and is prompting the LLM to generate the necessary infrastructure files. The infrastructure file has been generated already. We can track what's going on here. So we see now that we have an API file that is going to be used by CloudFormation to deploy the API gateway. Now the handlers are being generated. So we see here, see delete users by user ID, get plans. It's going to continue creating more and more handlers until it's done with all the different endpoints. Yeah, now we have get users. So when I wait for this to finish, this is also going to generate the documentation in this folder, and we're going to be able to serve it into the browser. Documentation will be generated after the API is deployed because we need the endpoint that is going to be created on API Gateway. For now, it's a dynamic endpoint. So we're going to need that information to create the documentation for the mock API. Okay, so now this is starting to deploy. If we go to CloudFormation, we're going to see the stack popping up here anytime. There it is. We can see all the events. We can see all the resources that are being created, different log groups for each Lambda 2. Okay, so this is deployed, and now it's gonna create the documentation. Okay, so now to see the documentation in a browser, what we're gonna do is we're gonna run serve. And we can see here the documentation with the API, the endpoint of the API, the type of authentication, and the different endpoints that it has with example requests and responses. So we're gonna try this live now, and we're gonna copy this URL. We're gonna go to Postman, we're gonna import the OpenAPI definition. And we see here that we have all the different requests to test the different endpoints. Let's start with the user, get users. So now this is responding the mock information that generated for this endpoint with a total of 100 items. And what we can do now is that we can try the pagination. Let's ask for page 2, and we don't want more than 4 items per page. So that means that, yeah, it's responding the second page, user ID 5 to 8, and saying that we're gonna have a total of 25 pages. So what we can do now is that we can also test get by user ID and see how that's working. Let's try with user ID1. I need to put the endpoint here, of course. Yeah, user ID1. Let's try with user ID5. So we can see how this is dynamically responding different results, and it's really dynamic and great mock API to use when you're building an application on top of an API that is not yet available. Let's try with creating a user. Let's see what happens. Okay. So invalid email format. Great. It's validating that I'm actually sending the right email. It's giving me status 400 bot requests. I'm going to use this in my email here. And then, yep, 201 created. Fantastic, right? Thank you very much for watching.